welcome to another edition of Let's Be Perfectly Queer on Rogers TV Barrie. I've got an amazing guest on tonight's show. I'm so excited to finally, albeit virtually, have Daniela Chase join us. So let me first tell you a little bit about Daniela. She is the proud mom of 2 children, the elder of whom self-identifies as gender non-binary. She believes that she has much to learn from her non-binary child about courage, vulnerability, and resilience, and looks forward to the day everyone embraces the fact that identity and gender are natural elements of self-concept and self-expression. Until then, she will stand in solidarity with and exercise her voice and her privilege in support of those who are being robbed of theirs. Daniela is also a board-certified master coach and practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. Believing that one of the most effective ways to support children is to support their parents and caregivers, she utilizes her professional training and draws from her lived experience to specialize in working with parents who are contemplating or experiencing separation and divorce, or have transgender and non-binary children. Daniela maintains her practice here in the city of Barrie, Ontario. And please welcome to the show, Daniela Chase. Hi, Daniela.
Hi, Randy. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know you and I had a chat a few days ago leading up to this interview, and we went way over the time that we had allotted for that. So we'll likely have to do a 2-parter here, but I am excited to have you on the show. So let's get right into it and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your journey, and particularly your journey in navigating the world of gender diverse, non-binary children and how we raise those kids to have visibility.
Oh my goodness. I honestly see myself as barely scratching the surface of all the things there are to know. And really look at what I have learned over the last 6 to 7 years since my child came out and self-identified to me as a conversation that I need to be having very specifically with older parents, with my age peers. When I came across the statistic that 56% of 13 to 20-year-olds know someone who uses they, them pronouns, it was like a ding, ding, ding went off in my mind. And I realized that the younger generations are having a different conversation than my age peers are. And opening up our awareness to the gender binary myth is critical if we're going to move in the direction of deeper understanding of healing relationships and allowing families to get back to the business of really loving one another and unconditionally accepting one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and moving my coaching business and in that direction and embracing all of that work. It truly is a passion project because I hear all too often the shared stories and experiences of gender non-binary folk, gender diverse folk, experiencing what it is to live in a world that has not yet widely carved out space for them. Mm. And the emotional labor of doing that for themselves every single day requires so much of their energy that they are effectively blocked from becoming all that they could be simply because their energy is being used up in many ways simply to get through a day.
Sure.
And represent themselves authentically. And I think as someone who shows up in the world as a white cisgendered woman of privilege, there is so much energy that I have freed up by virtue of that privilege that I can do all kinds of things and have the energy to do them. That opportunity is something that should be available to every single person, regardless of gender. So if I can open up those conversations and build those bridges and create understanding and empathy and compassion, forgiveness, grace, all of those things, I'm on board.
Yeah, and I love you've sort of coined the expression "bridging the generation gap."
Yes.
And I think that's absolutely brilliant because, as you and I discussed earlier this week before the show, we were raised in a time where all we knew was the binary.
Yes.
You were either male or female. You were either a boy or a girl, and your assigned gender at birth was what you were sort of stuck with, and coming to the realization that gender and sexuality and really all aspects of humanity are on this spectrum, and recognizing that we are on this spectrum, and being able to respect the idea that there is more than just the one and the two, the black and the white. There's so many grays and well, not grays. There's so many beautiful colors in the rainbow, and I think it's great for us to be able to embrace those. And I think it's important and necessary that we do that, especially for our kids, and making sure that they're safe and loved, and that they know that. You and I talked about this as well, that I can't fathom the idea as a parent myself ever not loving my child regardless of what their choices may be, or in a situation of one's gender. Not a choice, right? It's who you are. And to reject someone, especially someone that you created, just because of who they are or who they're becoming, it doesn't compute in my mind. I can't understand that when you have the choice of either accepting and embracing your child for who they are, or quite frankly, burying your child in many cases, right? Because we see, I don't know the statistics, I'm sure you do, with respect to kids who don't have that loving environment when they're going through these changes, and what that means in real life numbers for their survival. And I would much rather have my child express themselves the way they are comfortable expressing themselves than not have them in my life at all.
Absolutely. And I want to backtrack just a little bit. I was raised not by my natural birth parents. I was raised by relatives who provided the best home they were able to provide for me, who were loving, and still at times really missed the mark in terms of providing me with this safety that I needed. And even just by virtue of having been raised by people who were not my natural birth parents, raised all kinds of questions, like around abandonment and rejection, and why is it that this situation has occurred. And growing up with that sense of where do I actually fit here? Do I really belong here? Where do I find my belonging, and how do I find my belonging? Gave me a basis for understanding my child when they came to me and said, despite having been raised in, but by parents who loved them, they still experienced invisibility in their childhood because their own self-concept didn't find a space that we created for them. And not because we were in rejection of anything, we simply didn't know. I was completely invested in the gender binary myth back then. And we had a very traditional household with, a mom and a dad, and till death do us part was the prevailing attitude. And I can remember when my oldest child was born, Mrs. Chase, congratulations, you have a girl. And then my second child came along, and congratulations, Mrs. Chase, you have a boy. And oh my goodness, our friends were ecstatic because now we had this millionaire's family. We were complete because we had one of each. And simply not understanding that by creating this world where everyone was either male or female and the children were either girl or boy, we were robbing our oldest child of an opportunity to really discover themselves, because the inadvertent messaging was your self-concept either doesn't or shouldn't exist. And that wasn't something that we were creating on purpose. It was something that was a byproduct of our own lack of awareness, our own ignorance, if you will, right, around gender and what gender really is all about. And I've had any number of conversations with my older child at this point that they're sharing their lived experience, and their conversations where sometimes the content is really hard for me to hear and really important for me to say, oh my goodness, it doesn't matter what my intentions were. I need to recognize that in the choices that I made, in the environment that I contributed to creating, I harmed you. And I need to own that. And I need to do the work now of making amends, and very important, forgiving myself so that I can put my energy into having the conversations around how can I now demonstrate my allyship in a way that is effective for you. And this is a conversation I think that every parent of a gender diverse individual needs to be having, because we can go out and learn a lot, and we are responsible for our own education. It is completely inappropriate to expect our child to provide all of those answers for us. Sure. We need to go out and educate ourselves, and then we need to come back to our child. And I learned this from my child. We need to come back to our child and say, hey, here's what I learned. Here's how I've understood it. Is this a practice that demonstrates effective allyship for you, or would you like me to do it differently?
Right.
Because everyone is in a different place on their journey. So what works for one may not necessarily work for another. And it's really, really vital that we maintain those open lines of communication and speak honestly and vulnerably and courageously with our children, regardless of what age.
It's an evolving situation, right? It's ever changing, and to close off those lines of communication when you feel, I have the answers now.
Yes.
Those answers that you have now aren't necessarily the same answers that you're going to have for the same situation 2 weeks or a month from now, right? So
well, absolutely, because it's no different from my journey of self-discovery. I am constantly learning new things about myself, and the way in which I express myself in the world continues to change as I learn and grow. So why would I expect that to be any different for my child?
Right.
Right. And gender really is simply one more aspect of how we can really get to know ourselves and learn how to more fully express and embody who we are. The big challenge for gender diverse folks is living in a world that has not yet created space broadly for them to do that.
Right, which is another reason why the work you do is so important, because
yes.
that helps create that safer space, that world that we want our kids to be able to grow up in.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to some of the specifics with respect to your journey and how you navigated. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of your child's coming out to you and talking about being gender binary and how that went and the lessons that you learned along the way?
So the conversation started in a parking lot outside of a coffee shop in Hamilton, somewhere between 6 and 7 years ago. And my child was sitting in the passenger seat of my car and said in a very serious tone, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." And so I turned to them, and I can't swear that this is verbatim, but I know that what I said was along the lines of, "I love you. Help me understand what that means. And how can I support you?" And those three statements effectively are the pillars of how I've tried to approach parenting from the get-go. So really,
I don't mean to interrupt, but do you remember exactly what it is your child said to you to prompt that response in you?
Yeah, absolutely. They said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." And I said, "What is it?" And they said, "Mom, I'm genderqueer." And that's when I turned to them and I said, "I love you. I'm not sure what that means. Help me understand. And how can I support you?"
Right.
Because I've always believed that my role as a parent, my job, if you will, is not to tell my child who or how to be. It is simply to, when they were young. I mean, in raising my children, my job was to create opportunities, to provide opportunities and experiences where they could figure out what it is that makes their heart sing, what it is that makes their soul soar. My job was never to tell them how or who to be. My job was to guide them through the process of experiencing life and figuring out what that is. And so when my child said to me, "Mom, I'm genderqueer," there was no part of me that was in rejection of that, because it's up to my child to tell me who they are.
Right.
And it's up to me to unconditionally receive and support that and love them. At the same time, I had my own experience, because this was new information, this was new context within which to relate to and experience my child. And one of the things I learned along the way was that I had all of these dreams and these illusions, really, about what I thought my child's life was going to look like. And I think that's a very common thing with parents. I mean, we dream these amazing futures for our kids. And some of us get very attached to those futures, and that dream becomes an agenda. And whether that's an agenda we impose on our kids or whether it's one we entertain in our own minds, we need to be very aware that universally there comes a point where we need to release the dream that we have for our kids and buy into the dream that they have for themselves. And that can be a very challenging thing for a parent, particularly if your values around parenting are rooted in any kind of generational codependency, which in my case, they certainly were. I had enough baggage when my kids arrived that was tied to a very deep need to protect them, to keep them safe, to create this bubble. And over the course of their growing up, I wasn't just raising my children, I was also, to some degree, raising myself all over again, and really dove into the deep work of that once my children were already adults. So we kind of grew up together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make, because I think a lot of, maybe not a lot, maybe I'm being overly generous, but I think there are parents out there who almost see having a child as almost a do-over for themselves, right? It's a time for them to through their child get things right that they missed in their own life thus far, and I think that's very dangerous when we look at our children as, you know, a reflection of, okay, this is the path that I took, and I made a wrong turn here. Had I gone left instead of right, so I'm going to make sure my child definitely goes right.
Yeah.
You know, that may not be the course for them. Just because that was your course and it didn't work out for you, doesn't mean by steering your child in the other direction, it's going to have a different outcome for them. And looking at your child's life again as sort of a chance for you to get it right this second time around. That's not how it works. But there are parents out there that feel that way, right?
1,000% that happens. That was my mom's way, my foster mom, who I love and adore. That was her way. She experienced horrific physical abuse as a child, and made a vow that when she had children, she was not going to physically abuse them. So when she was angry and when she felt discipline was called for, she had a different way that was unfortunately also abusive in terms of her approach to correcting undesirable behavior.
Right.
In my parenting, and I recognize that to a large degree, I mean, really what my mom was trying to do was protect us from the things that had harmed her.
Sure.
And I didn't have my children until I was like 28 and 30, almost 32. So I was old enough and had reached a level of maturity to understand that, yeah, my mom was trying to protect me, but the whole control thing, trying to keep me from making the same mistakes, whatever, was not, it didn't really help in terms of creating a close relationship where I felt able to go to her and speak to her about anything.
I think that again talks to intentions, right? That
Yeah.
the intent is I don't want my child to make the same mistakes that I did. So this is how I protect them from doing that. So the intent is, the intention is wonderful, that you want to again protect your child and keep them safe and have them avoid the mistakes that you've made. But invariably that ends up doing more harm than good in many cases.
And that did flow through to my own parenting. I can definitely think of instances where, in my desire to protect my children, I was overly controlling or overly protective and too much keeping them in a bubble. And at the same time, parenting, even when you're not looking at it through that lens, I learned so much from my kids. They taught me more about what I needed to heal, what was showing up in me that was problematic, that was certainly not helping them, certainly not helping me. The whole parenting journey is an incredible opportunity to unpack our own bag of stuff and begin to do the work of healing it. And where we need to be really careful is to ensure that we're not putting the responsibility for that work and not looking to our children to heal those things for us, but looking to our children and saying, oh my gosh, you're such a mirror for what I need to heal. Thank you. Now I'm going to go off and do that work. Sure. Because expecting you to fill any hole in my heart, that's not your job. That's my job.
So how do you respond then to parents of gender diverse, non-binary children who, and I'm sure you've had this experience, who aren't as accepting and reject their children or work to change them and almost like the conversions therapy sort of thing where, it's a phase you're going through. How do you address those parents and try to sort of win them over from the dark side, for lack of a better way to put things?
So here's the thing. I look at those parents, and first of all, the whole idea of conversion therapy just breaks my heart. I also understand that in order to open up a line of communication with those parents, I need to recognize that however misguided their actions are, their intentions are coming from the same place. They love their kids. They want what they believe is best for their kids.
Right. So
rather than vilifying them, I absolutely 1,000% do not condone that choice or that behavior.
Of course.
However, separating the behavior from the person and choosing to avoid vilifying the person and coming at them human to human and saying, hey, I get it. You love your kid. And based on the belief system that you have lived your whole life in, you're trying to do what you believe is best. However, let's have a conversation. Let's first of all start from a place of I get that you're trying to love and support your kid in the best way you know how. But let's suspend your belief system for just a moment. Let's put it on a shelf and let's begin to look at your child's lived experience, your child's self-concept through their lens. And let's also begin to look at, like one of my favorite things to do in those situations is to say, okay, we all have lived experience around someone else trying to tell us how to show up in the world, whether it's career choice, whether it's life partner choice, whether it's, regardless, it could be anything. We've all had an experience where someone else tells us that what we are choosing for ourselves is wrong. And we all know what that feels like. So reframing the parents and allowing them to connect with their own experiences around being told what they should or should not be, allowing them to connect with those feelings and guiding them to a place where they can begin to see that this is effectively what they're doing to their child. And when they know how damaging that experience has been for them, they can begin to understand that good intentions notwithstanding, how they're manifesting, that the behavior that they're engaging is actually doing more harm than good.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
To a devastating degree at times. And that's the heartbreaking piece. So through the pandemic, I have been building out a program that is geared towards families who, through this period of self-isolation and physical distancing, is going to allow them to get into a 6-week group coaching online program with me to guide them through the process of having those conversations, those coming out conversations in a very compassionate way. And I'm offering a free masterclass for families that are interested in getting to know more, and that is a lead into the 6-week coaching program. And I'm offering that program on a sliding scale basis. So I'm quite willing to have conversations with families who are feeling the financial pinch, whether it's through job loss or through just restricted income. It really doesn't matter to me. It matters. I mean, obviously, I need to make sure my bills are paid as well. Sure. But it matters to me more that we're having these conversations, that people are growing in their understanding, and particularly that gender diverse folks are being accepted unconditionally by the people they love the most, because not having those conversations, the cost is far too high.
Just really quickly, in the last minute we have here, your podcast that's coming up soon.
Podcast is designed to share stories and have conversations around breaking through barriers to becoming. And all of my work is very, very geared towards becoming all of who we are, and doing that in a joyous and celebratory way. So I'm super excited. And am I allowed to share who my inaugural guest is?
Go for it. Go for it.
My inaugural guest is the amazing Randy Davis, and we are going to continue the conversation on the podcast. And the first episode will be aired on May 11th. So look for it.
Well, I certainly look forward to that. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show this evening and talk with us. It's important information, and we will absolutely carry on the conversation. So thank you, Daniela. Very much appreciate it. Thank all of you for watching tonight, and I hope you'll tune in again for another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer.
Yes.